Chapter 3. I checked the clock above the stove, and give or take 10 minutes, I figured I had 2.5 hours to pack and get a head start before Dad got back. For some odd reason, the first thing I put in my bag was a 6-pack of canned juice and some protein bars. It wasn't like I was going camping, but I thought it would be a good idea to take some food anyway. Next, I found myself throwing a can opener in the bag. It seemed like something everyone should have. I tried not to look at photo albums as I hurried past Dad's trophy case. There were more important things to bring, and I didn't have a ton of room for pictures. I grabbed a medium-weight jacket from the closet and climbed the stairs 3 at a time. In my room, I grabbed the Swiss Army knife my dad gave me for Christmas. I stood there picking at a hangnail as I tried to think about what my life would be like once I left, where I'd live, where I'd work, and how I'd finish school. I caught myself thinking about falling in love with someone who I hoped was out there right now thinking about the possibility of me, but I quickly banished the notion. It was that kind of thinking that landed me in this situation to begin with. Hope can ruin you. I packed exactly 7 clean pairs of socks and underwear. I wanted to take more so I wouldn't have to do as much laundry, but the bag was only so big and I needed to be able to sling it over my shoulder without it slowing me down. The hardest part was actually figuring out what clothes to take. I'd need something nice for a good job interview, and my sport coat and tie didn't fold up nicely in the bag. I folded the jacket 7 different ways from Sunday before I just wadded it up beside my sweatpants in a corner of the bag. In the bathroom, I threw my toothbrush in my DOP kit and stopped at my reflection in the mirror. I grabbed some tweezers and plucked at a stray hair growing in the middle of my eyebrows. I'd never seen a hair there before, which could only mean there'd be more, so I tossed the tweezers in too. By the time the moon had drifted over the window's line of sight, I decided my food choice hadn't been wise. I could drink water for free anywhere, and therefore should ditch the drinks and pack more food, maybe some canned goods, maybe some peanut butter. I headed downstairs back to the kitchen, but stopped by the shelves with the photo albums. I reached up high and dragged one of the albums off the dusty top shelf. I opened to a page of me at 11 months, drinking a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon. The tradition continued through my childhood. My dad used to cook out on the grill when it began to get nice outside in late May, when the gardenia bush began to bloom. He'd come home from work, sometimes whistling a Johnny Cash song, and you'd never know he had any troubles while he dragged out the industrial-sized sack of coal and filled up the grill, lighting it just so because only amateurs used lighter fluid. Then we'd wait at least an hour to get the coals perfect, a radiating core of molten light in the middle, before we could actually put the burgers on. It drove Mom crazy. Mom would pass the long wait by shooing away flies from the cheap meat patties and slicing onions and looking out on the horizon for something that never seemed to come. While he waited for the embers to light in that perfect configuration, Dad would enjoy a beer or two on the deck he'd built with his own 2 hands. And he'd ask yours truly each time to go inside and grab the beer he'd put in the freezer, and each time I'd shake it as much as possible before I brought it to him. Sometimes I'd toss the can up in the air and spin it like a baton. Sometimes I'd jump up and down with it. Sometimes I'd roll it on the kitchen floor like I was bowling. I'd walk onto the deck slowly as if there was nothing to hide, and I could always tell he knew what I was up to. That was part of the ritual, part of the game. I'm sure he could read my smirk when he took the beer out of my tiny hands, but he played along anyway. Sometimes he'd hold it over the grill and pretend like it was going to explode over my burger. Sometimes he'd ask me to open it. Sometimes he'd chase me around the deck threatening to spray it in my direction, and sometimes he'd open it and act surprised when the spray caught him in the eye. He was consistent about one thing, however. He always let me take a sip, safely out of Mom's line of vision, before he set the hot dogs on the grill. I came across a picture my mom's sister had taken of us at a cookout where I'd accidentally given Mom the can of Dad's shaken beer. Aunt Mary Sue snapped the picture the instant Mom opened the beer, and the entire picture exploded with a foamy spray on top of elated, surprised faces. There had always been my mother's favorite picture, and I stared at a chocolate-smudged thumbprint in the corner that proved it. I leafed through the rest of the album and pulled down another one. This one had a series of shots Dad took on one of our frequent train-watching trips. Dad loved to follow trains, take pictures of the engines, wait at crossroads and deserted towns for some old, rarely seen engine to whir past us. Mom would pack a picnic lunch and we'd pile into the car and bounce along a deserted main street in some choked-out old town, with me crawling around the weeds near the tracks looking for June bugs and railroad spikes, while Mom and Dad drank beer and munched deviled eggs until the train passed. By the time I was a teenager, those trips felt like punishment, but in the pictures, We were nothing but broad smiles and desiccated towns. We laughed with unbridled joy whenever the trains finally whizzed past and sent the wind whipping through our hair. I rubbed my finger over the picture of my mother at a kindergarten graduation. Time seemed to have faded it. My mother stood behind my father in the back row of the audience, and her image had become blurry. I remember how uncomfortable my mother was having her picture taken. She must have fidgeted each time someone snapped the shot. That would explain the blur. I flipped through the rest of the pages and noticed that while the shots seemed clear, Mom's image in them had become increasingly faded. She'd been growing fainter and fainter by the year, and I was surprised I'd never noticed it before. By the time I saw a picture before my first ever basketball game, you could barely see her at all sitting behind my father on the bleachers. I checked my watch. I'd been stupid to look at old pictures. I should have been on the road long ago. It was 11:15, and I haven't figured out what I was going to do for money. I flipped the album's pages to my mom's favorite shot, of the beer can exploding on us. I peeled back the cellophane so I could remove the picture and noticed a little strip of paper poking out from behind it. I stripped the photo off the sticky page, and there it was. I couldn't believe what I saw. I glanced around the room. Maybe there was a camera. Maybe this was a practical joke. It had to be. But I looked back at the page. It was plain as day. A note. The edges of the paper were almost as dry and brittle as the picture. I tore off all the other photos one by one and discovered underneath a hidden treasure of pictures, another set of photos I was never meant to see until now. I stared down at the note in my hands, my fingertips numb, and the words written in my mother's perfect, deliberate cursive burned in my mind. To my son, know yourself. I tucked the stack of photos into my bag and ran out the door.